Hey guys, Snoozy here. Today we're going to be going over the Lighting Sentry Trap Assassin. While part of this guide will also help with a Fire Trap Assassin, that is not the primary focus of this guide. We will be focusing specifically on lightning traps. And this is going to be my way of building a Magic Find Trap Assassin. This build isn't going to be for maximum damage, it's going to be mostly for Magic Find. So with that said, we're going to get straight into it here on the stats. So as the stats, you can see I have 194 strength, but the base value is only 63. This value is going to change depending on what gear you currently have. This build does use an Enigma, so you're going to have to either put more points into strength if you don't have Enigma yet, or if you do have Enigma, you'll need less. So you might have to respec once you get your Enigma to really get optimal with your stat points. You're looking for a minimum of 156 strength for this build because we are using Spirit Monarchs. We're going to be using them on our primary and our secondary for our swap, and that's going to be important for the +2 skills for battle orders and stuff like that with the Cult Arms. However, if you're not planning on hitting the 156 strength, maybe you're using 2 claws, maybe you don't want to put that much strength in it in the beginning, you could use like a lidless wall to get the +1 skill. However, I highly recommend going for the +2, that way you can get the Spirit Monarch because it's a much better shield. Your dexterity for this build is going to be just the default. It'll get boosted by the rest of our gear. However, if you are not going to be following this guide exactly for your gear and you're going to maybe be using a claw instead of the Hodo, or you're going to use 2 claws, you're going to want enough dexterity just to make sure that you can use your claws. After you have enough strength and dexterity to use all of your gear, everything else will be dumped into vitality. This is just going to ensure you have a big health pool to work from, and it's going to give you a lot of tankiness. With the stats being done, we're going to go straight into the gear. Your primary weapon here is going to be a Hodo. It gives you 40 faster cast rate, 3 to all skills, and on top of that, you're going to get 30 to 40 all resistances. Since this build's going to be mostly using burst to speed, this resistances are really helpful. For your helmet, we're going to be using a Shaco. It's a pretty standard across most builds. You get 2 to all skills, 2 to attributes, some life and mana, plus the magic find to 50%. And we're going to put an rune in that. Runes and helmets will give you a 15% magic or all resistances. If you don't want to do that and you want more magic find, you can Ist or Perfect Topaz. The Ist does technically have 1% more magic find than a Perfect Topaz. However, Istrun is a lot more expensive. Personally, I use Perfect Topazes because I'm cheap, but if you want best in slot for magic find, Istrun's going to be the highest you can get. For our amulet, we're going to be using Amara's for the +2 skills. You get the 5 attributes and the 30 all resistance. You could also use a rare amulet here for 2 to assassin, preferably 2 to assassin. You could get away with 2 to traps, but you're going to have a lower burst of speed. On top of that, we're going to go ahead and use an Enigma. This will be your primary armor. The teleporting around is fantastic. You get the 2 skills, and you get all of that strength to help wear your Spirit Monarch. You get the life after each kill. You get the increased maximum life. You get magic find. It's an insane item. Like, realistically, it's one of the best armors in the game. So that's going to be the primary armor for this build. If you do not have an Enigma, what you can do, and this is generally what I do for my build, is I'll run a Sculptor's Ire. You will get a lot less out of the Sculptor's Ire, but you'll get more magic find. And it's a lot cheaper than an Enigma. It makes a really good placeholder. As we've talked about, you're going to use the Spirit Monarch. You get the 2 skills, you get the cast rate, and you get the 55% hit recovery. The cast rate does vary, so when you're looking at your breakpoints, make sure that you're still hitting your breakpoints if you even have that faster cast rate, because it can go from 25 to 35. So please make sure you have enough cast rate on your Monarch. If you don't, instead of using Soges, you could use a cast rate ring here. Since we're on the topic of the rings, if you don't want to use Soges or they're too expensive, if you want to go the full magic find route, you could just simply use some Nagel rings here. Or rare rings with resistances, life, mana, stats, stuff like that will also work here. Here we're going to use the Mage Fist Light Gauntlets for the +1 to fire skills and the cast rate. It also gives you a little bit of mana regen, so it's not bad. Alternatively, you could use a Trang's Glove if you want more cold resistance. The belt's going to be the Arachnid Sash for the +1 to all skills and the 20% faster cast rate. It's pretty standard for casters at this point. For the boots, we're going to be using War Travs. They're generally pretty cheap as the ladder goes on. You don't need perfect ones. Just as much Magic Find as realistically you can afford or want on them. The technical best in slot, if you're not really caring about your Magic Find, is going to be the Tri-Res boots. So you're going to have 3 different resistances on it. You're going to have Run Walk on it, hopefully. And then after that, you can get stuff like faster hit recovery, and you can even get Gold Find or Magic Find on your Tri-Res boots. On the swap here, we're going to be using the Call to Arms. For this build, I highly recommend putting it in a Crystal Sword or something other than a Flail. However, a Flail will work. And the reason is, as you can see, look at my character model. Can you tell the difference just by looking at the character model on which weapon set I'm on? Now, if I had a Crystal Sword here for the Call to Arms, you could easily see what weapon swap you're on, and you're not running around using your Call to Arms thinking it's your Hodo. For the offhand, it's going to be the Spirit Monarch again, just for the +2 skills to buff those battle orders. For this build in our inventory here, we're going to go ahead and use 3 +1 skillers to traps with 12% faster hit recovery. This, with the 55 from our Spirit, is going to ensure that we're going to have enough faster hit recovery to hit our breakpoints. For this build, we're trying to hit the 86% faster hit recovery breakpoint, which is going to be pretty easy, honestly. If you don't want to get the faster hit recovery on skillers, you can get them on your small charms, or you could try to get them in other places. After that, we're just going to be using skillers with life on them. Pretty simple, pretty basic. You don't need life, and you don't need the faster hit recovery. You can use plain skillers if you want to save a bunch of currency. Just in general, for the small charms with most builds, we're going to be using these 20 to life, 5 to all resistances. You don't need these. Stack them with either Magic Find small charms, life small charms. What I would highly recommend is resistance small charms, even if they're single, even if they're only like 11 to fire or 11 to lightning, get your resistances up. That would be what I would primarily use for the slots here. And then just like every build ever, you're going to use your torch. So it's an assassin torch and an Annie. These will affect how many stat points you have to put into strength and dexterity, stuff like that. So the higher you can get them with the more resistances, the better, but you don't really need to break the bank. You definitely don't need 20/20 of both of these. That's far too expensive. You can get by with a lot less unless you're really trying to push the max out of the build. For our inventory of our mercenary here, we're going to have the Endaro's Visage Ethereal. I rarely, if ever, get an ethereal one. If it drops, I probably just sell it and then buy a non-ethereal one. It really doesn't matter that much. We're going to go ahead and stock it at the Row Room to get around that -30 fire res penalty that Endaro's Visage normally has. If you're super rich or you're going to really break the bank here, you could get a fire resistance jewel with attack speed on it and put it in here as well. Armor is going to be the go-to fortitude here. Realistically, you do not need this to be ethereal. If you have a non-ethereal one laying around, you can put that on here, no problem. For the weapon, we're going to be using an Infinity. I personally prefer the Thresher. However, you could use something like a Man Catcher as well. That would be perfectly fine. The reason we're using the Infinity is because of that Conviction aura. That's going to help break lightning immunes. I don't really see the point in using a Lightning Sunder. You can use a Lightning Sunder if you want. It will help bring the lightning resistances down, and nothing will actually be immune to you. So you can use the Lightning Sunder. You might find that better. I kind of think it's going to be a preference. And the reason I say that is Lightning Sentry cannot use Facets or Griffons to bring down the enemy's lightning resistances. Your traps do not count as you. However, the Sunder Charm will make it so your traps will be able to break the immunities. So it's really up to you. Play around, see which one you prefer. Lightning Sunders aren't very expensive. You can get a really cheap one, especially a couple days after the ladder. They go down pretty quick. At least that was my experience with this ladder. For our Mercenary Aura, we're going to be using Holy Freeze just for some defensive here. You're already lowering their resistances with the Conviction, so the added cold damage is helpful. But the main thing is going to be the Aura to slow stuff around you. Super useful while you're teleporting, and it'll keep him alive a little bit better. If you can't afford the Fortitude, what you could also do is a Treachery. Treachery is really good for mercenaries. I generally wait for Fortitude as one of the last upgrades for the entire character. So most of my characters are running Treachery for a very long time. For your breakpoints, like I said, you want to hit that 86% breakpoint for the faster hit recovery. We're slightly over it here. And for the faster cast rate breakpoint, we want to hit the 102% breakpoint. What's important to note here is you really want to watch and see if you can hit this breakpoint, and it's going to depend on what your Spirit Monarch is. The other options are, in early game, you're probably not going to have the Hodo, so you're going to lose the 40 cast rate. This isn't too bad of a loss if you don't have Enigma, because when you're laying down traps, that's going off of your attack speed, not necessarily your cast speed. But that's why we're going to be using the burst of speed mostly over everything else. Since we're talking about burst of speed, we're going to go straight into the skill tree now. Notice how I have nothing in martial arts. This is going to be a preference. If it's early ladder and you don't have Enigma, I highly recommend getting 1 point down all the way to Dragonflight. It'll teleport you to your enemy, which does put you in a little bit of danger, but it's really nice for places like the River of Flame. If you're trying to go to the Chaos Sanctuary or something like that, you can just teleport across. It does require an enemy be there, so it's not nearly as good as teleport, but for 4 points, you can definitely spend them there. For Shadow Discipline, we're going to be going all the way to Burst of Speed. If it's early ladder, or just preference, you could also put 1 point into Fade. However, since your traps are being put down by your attack speed, I really recommend the Burst of Speed, especially if you don't have Enigma yet. Fade is super useful, especially at the early game. Maybe you're trying to get down to Bale to do your Bale quest in Hell, and there's souls everywhere. Fade will give you some extra resistances and help you get through there, but you will put your traps down slower, and it's pretty noticeable. So you'll want to be careful and swap between them depending on what the situation is. On the other side, we'll go all the way down to Mind Blast. You only need 1 point the whole way down here. This is just so you can stun groups, and if the monsters aren't special, you can actually convert them to fight for you. This is extremely annoying in party play. Please do not use this in party play unless they're asking you to or you're struggling, because when they're converted, your team can't help you. Please do not be the assassin that's down at the Bale minions in the throne room casting this on them. You'll cause your group to slow down as they have to wait for this to fade off. So please do not use this in group play unless you've already asked, you're struggling, or they've asked you to. This is super helpful in solo, though, when you're trying to get through the acts the first time through. Cloak of Shadows is amazing, and I feel like most people do not use this. This will lower their defenses, and it also blinds them. You can sneak past monsters using Cloak of Shadows. This does not follow you. You'll see the little icon above their heads to show that they're actually affected. Now we're going to go into the traps, and this is a Lightning Sentry build, meaning we're going to stick mostly on the left side here. So the first thing that we're going to max is going to be the Lightning Sentry itself. After that, it really is preference on which one you would want to max afterwards. Generally, I feel like most people would want to do Shockwave because they can throw these down as well. However, it really doesn't matter. I very rarely use the Shockwave itself. But you will max either Charge Bolt Sentry or Shockwave as your second max, and then the other one is your third. We're only going to put 1 point into Death Sentry because we only really care about the Corpse Explosion. That's going to do 40 to 80% of the corpse life. So 1 point here is good enough. We don't care about the damage. After you have the Shockwave, the Charge Bolt Sentry, and Lightning Sentry max, the next thing you're going to max is Fire Blast. This is super helpful dealing with lightning immunes, and as you can see, it does 9.2 to 10,000 damage. So, I mean, it does a good bit of damage. You're really going to want this, especially for some lightning immunes, if you're not running that Sunder. On top of that, you can see the Wake of Fire. We're also going to max that next after Fire Blast. That's just to give Fire Blast a little bit more damage, and this gives you some more fire damage that you can deal with. After that, we're going to go ahead and use the Wake of Inferno. Now, if you really don't want the fire damage, you could go down to Blade Shield to get a little bit more damage there. You could also go ahead and put them down into your Shadow Warrior and Shadow Master if you want. If you're going to be going ahead and using Dual Claws, Weapon Block is super helpful as well. There's a lot of different things. You don't necessarily need to put the points into here. That's just where I would. So feel free to experiment and do with what you want to on there. Now that we have the skills in place here and the stats, we know the mechanics, let's talk about the early game here. Let's say you're getting into Hell, you've realized your damage is falling off and you're struggling. You might hear somebody talking about how to shop for claws, and what they're talking about is coming to Anya and looking at her claws here. She'll sell you a bunch of different claws, and what realistically you need to have happen for this to really be effective is you need a minimum of level 75 for your character. The shops will add a hidden invisible +5 to the item level, which means these will be an item level of 80. That will allow these claws to roll the +3 Lightning Sentry mod that we're looking for. What you're looking for here is a total of +5 to Lightning Sentry or +6 to Lightning Sentry, or whatever's better than your claw and you want to use it. If you're going with these claws, you can dual wield them, so you could technically get +12 from your claws to begin with. And the other important thing to note here is technically the best level to do this is at least level 94. That will push these to an item level of 99. After 94, you won't see any bonus to your chances here. But level 75 is the absolute minimum. Also, since these are blue claws, you can take them to Larzik with the option of getting a +2 open socket on there. It's not guaranteed, however. You'll either get 1 or 2. And that being said, collectors that really like these +6 claws, they may value an unsocketed claw more highly than a +4 or an open socket. And the reason is, if it doesn't have any sockets, you can take it to Larzik and you still have that chance of getting +2. So as you saw, Anya didn't have anything for us, so we're going to go ahead and go into the portal, run around a bit until it lets us come back out, and then go back in and you can look at different claws. Very long grind, very boring grind. And please, if you are doing this, make sure you have a bunch of gold, because there's going to be nothing worse than seeing a +6 here and not having enough gold to buy it. So now that we've covered that, what we're going to go ahead and do is get straight into the gameplay, and we're going to do a player's one just so you guys can see how the gameplay works here. We are going to put on our burst of speed, so we run quick. And we teleport straight down. Put down your traps. And make sure you put down 1 death sentry. That way the corpse explosions will start going off. And as you see, the lightning sentries shoot in a straight line. So if you're in a hallway, you're going to want to use the angles to get a better angle on them to hit more monsters than normal. You can have 5 traps out at once. And this includes a mix match. That's a total amount of traps. So mostly you're going to want to do 4 lightning sentries, and then you can go ahead and put down a death sentry if you want the explosions. One nice thing about the trap assassin is you can put the traps down before hitting the seals. That way they're already going off. You need to get the mercenary down here to break the lightning immunes. This is where having the lightning sunder would be really useful, especially if you don't have infinity. So at least you can get them down here and get them broken and start doing a little bit of damage. If they are immune, make sure you throw out your fire blasts. As you can see, they do a decent amount of damage. One annoying thing is Decrepify does affect your attack speed, so you will lay traps down slower. So you'll want to keep an eye on that, that way you know how fast you're actually putting down your traps. Teleported over, they spawn back here, put down a death sentry, make quick work of them, and continue on. It's a very, very relaxing playstyle, and it is a little bit slower than, Nova sources or other builds like that. However, this is extremely safe. With this build and the recommended gear, you're looking at 4.5k with your battle orders on for your life. You're pretty tanky. On top of that, you're getting 75 to all resistances if you have a really good gear. You're going to want to be really careful here and watch your mercenary's life, as these do a lot of damage. After that, we're going to go back up the teleport here and just show the single target damage to Diablo. And as you can see, Diablo's no match. Goes down insanely quick. Now keep in mind, this was just player 1 gameplay. This build is capable of doing player 8 Chaos Sanctuary and carrying it. It is not nearly as fast as geared sorceresses or Amazons, but you can do it, and you can do it in Magic Find gear, and it's pretty safe. So there are a lot of different options to the Trap Assassin, and this is mine. I like having a high amount of magic find for them. Hopefully in the future, Blizzard will give them a buff and allow them to use Griffons and Facets to also reduce the lightning resistances of the monsters. I feel like that's a really important buff that I hopefully they will see in the future, but currently, Griffons and Facets is a waste of time on your Lightning Sentry Assassin. So that's really all there is to it. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Please comment if you guys have any questions or issues, and I'll try to reply to all of them. I also do try to live stream currently 5 to 7 p.m. every day, so let me know on the live stream and just ask questions. I love answering them. I love helping you guys out. So that's all there is to it. Hopefully you guys like the build. Let me know if there's any questions, and I'll talk to you guys later.